Hello, this is Tricia Shadden. I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up, and I have a card project to share with you today. I'm going to be making this pretty card with the papers from the Artfully Composed Suite and a couple of other products that I think coordinate pretty well with it. So let's go ahead and dive in and get started. We're going to be working with some elements from the Artfully Composed Suite. This is in the January to June mini catalog. It's on pages 32 and 33. And you can see the components of that suite. There's this beautiful 12 by 12 DSP. There's 12 by 12 vellum as well. A white frayed ribbon, some really cool sea glass shapes, and a stamp set and coordinating die set, the Artfully Layered Bundle, and the Artfully Composed Papers. So I don't have the stamp set yet. I still have to get my hands on that. So I'm going to take these other elements that I do have pieces of and combine them with some other Stampin' Up! Products and show you how you can certainly use these things with outside of the suite as well. So here's a look at some of the papers. These are the scraps that I have left. So this isn't all of them, but I think it's most. So they all have this really beautiful tropical color palette as well as design. And the front of the paper are these really bold patterns. And then if we flip them all over, we've got much more neutral, like smaller scale, almost read like solid papers. And I think that's typical of all the DSPs. So one of the ones that we're going to be working with, I'm going to set these all aside. One of the ones that we're going to be using for the background is this brightly colored pattern on the one side, and on the other side it is Pale Papaya, and it just has a really faint script in it. So it has some texture, but it almost reads like a solid paper. So I'm going to use that as the layer behind my focal point. And then I also took, and I already cut this, so I'm just going to show you how it started. By the way, this paper is 4 by 5 1/4. I've cut it 4 by 5 1/4. So I'll set that aside. And then this paper, let's line it up, that's how that looked on that side. And this paper was, I cut it to 3 1/2 by 4 3/4. And then once I had that panel cut, then I went straight down the middle of both directions. So on this direction, it's 1 3/4, and on this direction, it's 2 3/8. And just the back of this paper, just so you know, is just a really pretty green, like variegated stripe. But we're going to use the front side. And again, I want to make sure that I'm lining these up so that the pattern looks continuous, but we're going to just separate them a little bit. Okay, so we've got those pieces. I also have a scrap of some Pear Pizzazz paper and a couple scraps of the basic white paper. And I am going to be stamping, as I mentioned, I don't have the Artfully Layered set, so I am going to be stamping with the Flowering Rain Boots just to use this one little pot, because I thought that would kind of coordinate with this. So I've already taken this one right here and mounted it on my block. So we're just going to use that one little pot. And I have the coordinating dies for that. And we will be using just that die to cut out our pots. And then for my sentiment, I took my sentiment, it's just Happy Birthday from the Special Moments Celebration stamp set. And this has just tons of great sentiments in it. This was one of the level 2 celebration items, and just a great thing to have in your stash because so many occasions are covered here. So I've got that Happy Birthday, and it's mounted here on my each block. So let's start with our stamping. Oh, the other thing I'm going to use, I should have told you, is the Bough punch. So this punch has a smaller, more delicate little sprig and then a larger leaf sprig. And we're going to be using that to cut out some pieces. All right, so the colors in this DSP, which is such a pretty palette, are Calypso Coral, the Pale Papaya, as I mentioned, this DSP has, the Pear Pizzazz, Evening Evergreen, Just Jade, and Mint Macaron. So I'm going to stamp my pots in the Calypso Coral. I have the old style pad for this one, but the ink is just the same. This is a distinctive stamp. I'm going to bring in my pad to stamp on and slide it under me. I do like to stamp on like a foam pad. So I'm going to bring in, like I said, the Calypso Coral Ink. And I was starting to say this is a distinctive stamp if you haven't used these yet. One single stamp in one color gives you all the highlights and shading to make your image look three-dimensional. So it's a really cool design that Stampin' Up! Does. So I'm going to stamp that down twice just on my scrap paper. And then I am going to use my coordinating die, and I'll take this over to my die cutting machine and cut this out. Cut both of them out. Okay, I am done over at the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. So I've got my beautiful cutout pots in the Calypso Coral. And I want to put a little slit in the top of these. So I have a mat here that I can cut on. And I'm just going to use a craft knife. And I'm just going to cut slightly above the front edge of that pot. So I don't know if you can see, like if I put my blade down in there, that I'm making like a little opening in the pot. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. Okay. That's it for the pots. Now we are going to use our punch and that strip of the Pear Pizzazz paper. And I'm just sliding my paper in here. And I really only want this larger one. So I'm lining it up and I'll give that a punch. And now I've got a really beautiful sprig there. Then I will angle this a little bit so that I can get another punch. And I'm going to do this 4 times. I want 4 of these out of my piece of cardstock. There we go. So now I have these little sprigs from the Bough punch, and I can tuck the stems down into, you see where I went right through that slit that I created? Hopefully you can see that. And I'm just going to tuck them right down into the pot. And if you take one stem, so here's an exact match, right? If you take one and flip it around the other direction and tuck it in at a different height, it kind of looks like you have 2 different plant pieces sticking out the top, right? And then I'll do the same thing with this one. And slip my little stem down in there. And it really gives you a very different look when you just rotate those sprigs around, and you've got these beautiful potted looking plants. And that look cute. All right, so to secure those in place, I'm just going to use a little of my seal. And all I have to do is just run a little of that down on the base of the pot. Make sure I have them arranged a way that I like them, and then pinch the little stems right into the seal on the back of the pot, and that'll keep them in place. Then you just have to kind of be careful not to push this down onto your paper or get it stuck anywhere. But so I'm going to do the same with this and run some of that seal, and I'll pull them out of there. And I kind of got connected there. So organize them the way I like them, and then give them a little pinch back there so they're stuck in the pots. Okay, so we'll set those aside for a bit, and then we'll talk about assembling our elements. So as I mentioned, I've got this paper with the more solid side facing up, and I want to make sure that my pieces create a continuous pattern when I set them up, so it looks like my paper, the pattern of my paper is running from one to the next. And so do I have it that way? No. This goes down here, and that goes like that. There we go. Now it looks like it's running. So this big leaf is running all the way up in all four quadrants, and they're all connected. So I'm going to just use my seal to put these down, and I want them to be pretty much evenly spaced. Let me take my foam out of there. I think the seal works a lot better on a nice hard surface, so I've got to get my stamping foam out of there. Okay, so I do want these evenly spaced, so I'm just going to arrange them so I know about how much margin I need to leave in order for them to all look equal. I think that's probably about right. So I'm going to carefully okay. So we've got that piece. If we go back and take a look at the bundle, they had the designer series paper, and then I mentioned there was also this pack of 12 by 12 vellum. And I'm going to pull out a little bit of that. Again, I'm kind of down to scraps here, but you can see the different types of vellum. Some of them are text, some of them are like a map. I don't know how well you can see that. What if I put that against? I move this out of the way. Like this one's like a map. And there's a black printed version and a white printed version. There's also text, like newspaper text almost, in a black and a white printed version. More of a scripty text in a black, and then this is just a little scrap of the white printed version that I have left. And I'm going to take this white script piece, and I'm going to use my layering circles dies and just cut a circle out of here. So let me go do that. Okay, so here I have that little layering circle. And what I'm envisioning, let's see, is a sentiment, my sentiment to come off of this edge, and these two guys right about there. That's what I'm thinking. So what the vellum can do for you is it knocks down the busyness of the background pattern. It's so pretty, but when you want the attention to be on your focal point, you can put vellum behind it, and it just puts some distance between the foreground and the background so that you focus on the beautiful elements up front, and that doesn't get too distracted by the background. And I also should mention that is it the back of this one? Let's see. I think it's in the back of the annual catalog. But I was inspired. I kind of used this picture in the back of the annual catalog as my inspiration. So kind of the same sketch with the four quadrants and then the 2 potted plants. Now this uses an entirely different stamp set and obviously different colors and everything, but that was my inspiration for this card. So I always find lots of excellent inspiration right in the catalogs. So I think that's about where my layout's going to be. Let's go ahead and stamp our reading. And I think I'm going to do that in the Evening Evergreen, just to pull that dark color in. Grab my Evening Evergreen ink pad. And I've got, again, the Happy Birthday stamp from that Celebration stamp set called Special Moments. And I'm just inking that up. Line this up on my pad. And I'm going to go off to the left side of my scrap. Oh, I got lucky. So I forgot to put my foam pad under here, but it ended up coming out nice and crisp. So I got lucky on that one. And I'm just going to clean that off with my chamois. And now let's take another look and see. I know these pots are going to be over here, so I wanted to see if I had enough room for this sentiment. Oop. Getting away from me. Probably making you guys dizzy. Sorry about that. So let's tuck my 2 pots like that. And then the sentiment will go right on top. And I'll flag that end and give it a little tail, a little fish tail. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that, and give it a little cut down the center, and then I'll cut from one end to the top of that cut line, and then from the other end, from the other corner, right to the top of that cut line. And that gives me a nice little fishtail banner there. Here, I like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start adhering this. I'm going to take some dimensionals on the back of my pots. So we can pop those up. And this is also a way to trap those little stems into place when you put the dimensionals on there. So I've got 2 on each pot, and then I'm going to take my little mini dimensionals and I'm going to put a couple of those. I'm just starting a new sheet here, but I'm going to see if I can fit these on a few of these. Oh geez, these are even a little big for this, aren't they? These guys will fit, but I don't really need them on all of them. Like those crisscross, so I'm going to go ahead and, I don't know if you can see that, but where these 2 leaves crisscross, I'm going to go ahead and just put the dimensional right there, and it'll secure them in place. and I think I can fit one there, and I can fit one here, and I feel like I might need one up here, but I'm going to just do one more on this one in the center where these two crisscross, and that's probably good. I don't mind if these are a little bit looser on the top. I think they'll be secure enough. So let's go ahead, put our printed piece in place, or a printed piece of vellum, and I'll go ahead and peel the release paper off of my dimensionals. I just broke this fingernail, so I can't get on anything underneath it. Oh, that's awful. There we go. All right, so now I've got my dimensionals all sticky and ready to go, and I'm sticking these onto the vellum at this point, but the vellum is not stuck down to the paper. So I'm just eyeballing where I want them. And I'm just gonna go ahead and let them rest on the vellum. Make sure they're both kind of facing upright. I don't want that to stick on there yet. So now I've got it up off of the, popped up off of the vellum. And when I flip my vellum over, now I've got plenty of space to put some green glue to attach my vellum where you won't see it. So I can put that behind my pots and behind all of my leaves so that it stays in place well. So I've got some green glue on there behind my focal point. Bring my card back in here. And then I can just pop that down. And you can see that the edge of my little sprig here is just hanging off the edge of my cardstock just a tiny bit, but that's okay because this is a 1/4 inch smaller than an A2 card still. So when we put this on the card base, it won't overhang the edge. So I think it'll be okay. So now if I want my sentiment to come in like this, it's going to be lopsided because the pots are popped up, but over here is not. So I need some dimensionals over on this side to make it level. So let's put a couple of those on there, just on the left side. And then I'll put a little green glue on the right so that where it hits the pots, it can adhere and stay in place. So let's line this up on our grid mat. And I don't want that to be just quite that low. I want it right there. Try to get it straight. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah. So I've got my dimensionals supporting it over to the left, and then it's glued onto these pots over here on the right. So that looks great. And now I can take a piece of my thick basic white, and I've got that cut to, cut to 5.5 by 8.5, and then scored down the middle to make an A2 card base. And then I can take this piece, and oh, it kills me to cover up this beautiful pattern, but it just was, I needed that pale papaya on the other side. So I'm just gonna run a little liquid glue along the edge of this, and the liquid glue will give me just enough wiggle room to be able to center this on my card front and leave a nice little 1/8 of an inch white border all around. Give me a nice, come on. give that a nice press while that glue sets up. Okay. And my finishing touch, as I mentioned, there were some embellishments that were part of this Artfully Composed Suite also. And they're these little faux sea glass shapes. And I did not get my hands on an entire packet of those, but I did a product share with my team and I got just a couple strips of them. So I have some here that I'm going to add. And I think those are just going to add, like, they'll add a little bling, but in a real natural, organic type of way. That's what I love about them. I think they're so unique. They add a little something, but without the bright rhinestone effect. It's just a little more, yeah, I think I want to stick with the colored ones. And I'm just popping those on the vellum surrounding my sentiment. Couple little tiny one there, and that should do it. So you can see these little guys right here and how pretty the card turned out. So hopefully you guys like this project, and if you did and you want to see more like this, I'm going to be doing a lot more projects with the new Stampin' Up catalog. I have just signed on to become an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator, and so the focus of my YouTube channel is switching to be focused on Stampin' Up products and their suites and showcasing creative ideas in card making for them. So thanks so much for stopping by and joining me today. I hope you like this card project. I would love it if you gave me a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. And of course, if you are looking for Stampin' Up products and you don't have a demonstrator, I'd love to help you. You can certainly click the link in the description box below, and that'll take you right to my shop, where you can email me with any questions. I'm always happy to help. Thanks so much and have a terrific day.